quiet in my house now. The only sound is the low hum of the refrigerator. On the polished wood of my dining table, under the soft glow of a single overhead light, sits a small velvet box. Inside it a ring, a beautiful fiery 2-carat stone, set in 14-carat white gold. For 1 month, this ring was the symbol of my future, a promise of a life with the woman I loved. Now it's just evidence. It's the final report on a failed investment. It's the receipt for the best $1,850 I have ever spent. Because that's what it cost me to find out the truth. That's the price I paid to dodge a lifetime of debt. Not financial debt, but the soul-crushing debt of being with someone who loved what I could provide more than she loved me. Just a few weeks ago in early October, the silence in this house was unthinkable. It was filled with laughter, with plans, with the endless, excited chatter of my new fiancée, Jenna. We'd been engaged since September 23rd, and we were floating in that blissful, obnoxious bubble that only newly engaged couples get to occupy. Our phones buzzed constantly with notifications of congratulations. Our weekends were booked with celebratory drinks with friends. On the surface, everything was perfect. I was 31, a financial analyst with a stable career. She was 28, vibrant and beautiful, and she had said yes. The path forward seemed clear, a straight line to a wedding, a mortgage, a family. But even then, in the middle of all the joy, I felt a quiet, analytical unease. It was like reviewing a company's financial statements and seeing revenues that looked fantastic, but knowing deep down that the fundamentals were soft. My unease always grew sharpest whenever the ring became the center of attention, which was, to be honest, most of the time. Jenna had a way of making sure it was never missed. If we were at dinner, her left hand would be strategically placed on the table, fingers elegantly draped over her wine glass, the stone catching the light and scattering tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. If she was telling a story, her left hand would gesture emphatically, a glittering punctuation mark to every sentence. It was a performance, and I was her silent, supporting cast member. I remember one night in particular, we were out with her closest friends, Sarah and Chloe. It was one of those trendy, dimly lit bistros where the food is expensive and the portions are small. As soon as we sat down, the ritual began. "Oh my God, Jenna, let me see it again," Sarah cooed, right on cue. Jenna beamed, extending her hand over the table as if presenting a royal scepter. The stone, a brilliant 2-carat moissanite, sparkled with even more fire than a diamond under the restaurant spotlights. It was by any measure a stunning piece of jewelry. "Nolan, you really outdid yourself," Chloe said, her eyes wide. "That thing is a rock. What is that like?" 2 carats. Jenna answered for me, her voice a carefully curated mix of casual pride and feigned humility. "It is. 2 carats, exactly. He was so secretive about the whole thing, but I know he went to the best jeweler in the city. A stone with this kind of clarity and cut. We're talking in the ballpark of $20,000. A $20,000 lie, a number she had invented based on frantic Googling of diamond prices the day after I proposed. My actual cost was $1,850. A knot formed in my stomach, the same one that had been tightening and loosening for weeks. I just smiled and nodded, playing the part of the doting, extravagant fiancée. "She's worth it," I said the words, feeling like ash in my mouth. Jenna squeezed my arm, basking in her friend's envy. "He's the best," she sighed contentedly. For the rest of the dinner, the conversation orbited the ring. They talked about the insurance we'd need to get for it. They discussed the type of wedding band that could possibly measure up. Jenna recounted for the 3rd time that week the story of my proposal, but the details had shifted. It was less about the moment, the emotion, the question I'd asked, and more about the dramatic reveal of the box, the gasp as she saw the size of the stone. She was telling the story of an acquisition, not a commitment. I sat there sipping my water, an observer in my own life. As a financial analyst, my entire career is built on one simple principle: due diligence. You don't merge your assets with a company based on a flashy press release. You dig into the numbers. You run stress tests. You look for the hidden liabilities, the systemic risks that could bring the whole enterprise crashing down. And sitting there listening to the woman I was supposed to spend my life with, I felt a cold wave of certainty. My little experiment, my own personal stress test, had been the right thing to do. She wasn't just happy to be engaged to me, she was intoxicated by the perceived value of the asset on her finger. The ring wasn't a symbol of my love. It was her new favorite handbag. It was a luxury car. It was a status symbol she could wear to prove her worth, and by extension, my worth to the world. The idea for the test hadn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't born from a place of malice or a desire to trick her. It was born from a single chilling conversation back in August. It was a warm evening, and we were sitting on the patio of our favorite Italian restaurant sharing a bottle of wine. We'd been together for over 2 years, and the topic of marriage had naturally started to come up more and more often. That night, it felt different, more serious. Jenna had been scrolling through her phone showing me pictures from a friend's wedding. "Look at this," she'd said, zooming in on a picture of her friend's hand, a modest but beautiful diamond on her finger. "It's pretty. A little small, but pretty." I didn't think much of it. "Yeah, it's a nice ring." She put her phone down and looked at me, her expression suddenly serious, almost businesslike. "Babe," she started, her voice dropping to a confidential tone. "When we get there, when you're ready to take that step, I just want to be totally honest about my expectations, so there are no surprises." I leaned forward a little confused. "Okay." "I've been with you for a long time," she said, her eyes unwavering. "We're not kids anymore. And I think where we are in our lives, the kind of statement we want to make, it requires something substantial." She took a sip of her wine, letting the words hang in the air. "I'm not saying you need to break the bank, but I expect a real diamond. A nice one. At least 2 carats. I must have looked stunned because she quickly added, "It's not just a ring, Nolan. It's an investment in us. It's a symbol for everyone to see. It shows them that you're serious, that you're successful, that you can provide for me. It's the foundation of the life we're going to build." The foundation. Not love, not respect, not partnership. A 2-carat diamond. It was like she was quoting a term sheet for our love, a minimum buy-in, a non-negotiable clause in the contract of our marriage. Everything romantic I'd ever felt about a proposal, the surprise, the heartfelt emotion, the idea that any ring would be perfect because it came from me, evaporated in that moment. It was replaced by the cold, hard reality of a transaction. She had just given me the specifications for the purchase order of her affection. I remember nodding slowly, the wine suddenly tasting sour. "I understand," I'd said. And in that moment, I did. I understood everything. I understood that for Jenna, the symbol was more important than the sentiment. The appraisal value was more important than the emotional value. And that's when the analyst in me took over. I thought, if she's this focused on the monetary value, let's put it to the test. Let's isolate the variable. The variable wasn't love or commitment or partnership. The variable was the price tag. So I would give her everything she asked for visually. A 2-carat stone that was to the naked eye indistinguishable from a flawless diamond. A stone with more brilliance and fire. A beautiful, expensive-looking ring. The only thing it wouldn't have was the $20,000 market value. It would have the symbol, but not the commodity. The test was simple. Would she love the ring because it came from me and symbolized our commitment? Or would she only love it as long as she believed it was a high-value liquid asset? So on September 16th, I went out and bought the moissanite. I put it in the velvet box and I waited. When I got down on one knee on that perfect autumn afternoon on September the 23rd, and she saw the ring, her eyes lit up and she screamed, "Yes," before I even finished the question. For a moment, I let myself hope. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped her reaction was about me, about us, about the future she saw in my eyes. But as we sat in that bistro in early October with her boasting about a $20,000 price tag that existed only in her imagination, I knew my initial analysis had been correct. The test was ongoing, and every data point she provided was confirming my worst fears. I was engaged to a woman who had passed a credit check on my heart, but was about to spectacularly fail the character audit. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that it was only a matter of time before she'd try to verify the asset's value. I just had no idea how soon that would be. It turns out soon was an understatement. The ticking clock I couldn't hear was already at 1 second to midnight. The day the asset was finally verified, the day my entire relationship was audited and found to be bankrupt, was October 23rd. It was a Tuesday, a completely unremarkable Tuesday. I spent the day at my desk, deep in spreadsheets, running projections for a quarterly earnings report. I was a financial analyst after all. My job was to look at data, identify patterns, and predict future outcomes based on current behavior. It's ironic, really. I was paid to see the red flags in a company's balance sheet, but I had been willfully ignoring the ones fluttering in my own home. While I was analyzing corporate debt structures, my fiancée Jenna was conducting her own form of asset liquidation analysis. I didn't know it then, of course. I came home that evening and she was quiet, a little distant. I asked if everything was okay. She just shrugged and said she had a headache. I accepted it. I made dinner, we watched some mindless TV, and went to bed. I was completely oblivious. I was living in the calm, comfortable eye of a hurricane that had already made landfall, and I had no idea the storm walls were about to hit. It was only later during the final, brutal confrontation that I was able to piece together what she had done that day. And now sitting here, I can picture it all with perfect, painful clarity. I can see her probably around lunchtime on that Tuesday sitting in her car. The ring, my ring, our ring is on her finger, catching the midday sun. She's staring at it. For the past month since September 23rd, that ring had been her favorite topic of conversation, her primary source of validation. It was proof that she was loved, desired, and most importantly, secured. It was her $20,000 trophy. But a nagging thought must have been eating at her, a thought that's common to anyone who suddenly comes into possession of a high-value asset. What's it really worth? Not in theory, not in conversation with her friends, but in cold, hard cash. It wasn't enough to believe it was worth 20 grand. She needed to know. Maybe she saw a purse she wanted or a vacation she thought they should take. Maybe a friend had gotten engaged with a ring that looked just a little bigger, sparking a competitive insecurity. Or maybe, and this is what I truly believe, it was simply the gravitational pull of her own materialism. She couldn't resist the urge to quantify her own happiness. So she drove, not to a high-end jeweler on a fancy street where they'd offer her champagne while they looked at the stone. An official appraisal costs money and leaves a paper trail. No, she was smarter than that, or so she thought. She drove to a part of town we never went to, the kind of place with check-cashing businesses and laundromats. She drove to a pawn shop. I can see the sign in my mind, a faded, flickering neon thing that just says, pawn. I can see her taking a deep breath in her car, a little thrill of the forbidden running through her. She probably rehearsed her story. I'm just curious about the insurance value, a plausible, respectable lie. She slips the ring off her finger, the skin underneath, pale and indented. For a moment, her hand must have felt naked. She drops the ring into her purse, the weight of it no longer a symbol of commitment on her hand, but a commodity waiting for a price check in the dark of her bag. She walks in. The door jingles. The air inside is stale thick with the ghosts of forgotten treasures and desperate bargains. It smells of old paper and metal polish. Glass counters are filled with a jumble of other people's lives, gold chains, watches that stopped ticking years ago, a dusty saxophone, a row of electric guitars. This is not the world of bridal magazines and champagne toasts. This is the world of transactions, pure, simple, and brutal. Behind the counter is a man, not young, not old. He's seen everything. He's seen wedding rings from tearful widows and stolen laptops from nervous teenagers. He's a human lie detector, and his currency is realism. Jenna, with her trendy clothes and nervous energy, probably stuck out like a sore thumb. She approaches the counter, forcing a bright, casual smile. I can hear her voice a little higher than usual. Hi. She begins pulling the ring from her purse and placing it on a velvet tray he has on the counter. "I was hoping you could help me. This is my engagement ring, and I'm looking to get it insured. I just need a rough idea of its value for the paperwork." A solid lie, believable. It gives her an out. She's not selling, she's being responsible. The broker picks it up. He doesn't coo over it. He doesn't congratulate her. To him, it's just merchandise. He holds it under his lamp, turning it over with professional indifference. He squints through his loupe, the little magnifying glass jewelers use. He's looking at the setting, the prongs, the stamp inside the band. "It's a 14-karat white gold setting," he says, his voice flat. "Nice and clean." Jenna's smile probably tightens. This is the preamble, the warm-up before the big number. The diamond is 2 carats she offers a little too eagerly. It's very high quality. The broker doesn't respond. He just sets the ring down and pulls out a small pen-sized device from a drawer. A diamond tester. It's a simple tool. Diamonds are incredibly effective at conducting heat, while most fakes like cubic zirconia are not. So the tester has a tiny metal tip that heats up. You press it to the stone, and if the heat is whisked away instantly, it beeps. It confirms you have a diamond. But moissanite is different. It's a clever, beautiful stone created in a lab. It's almost as hard as a diamond, and it has even more fire and brilliance. And crucially, it also conducts electricity, something most diamonds don't do. So modern testers check for both heat and electrical conductivity to distinguish between the two. The broker clicks the tester on. A small light blinks. He touches the tip to the surface of the gleaming stone. For a second, there's silence. Jenna is probably holding her breath, her heart pounding. This is it. The moment of validation, the confirmation of her $20,000 prize. But the tester doesn't give the sharp, singular beep she's expecting. Instead, it emits a different kind of tone, a continuous, slightly different pitch. The broker glances at the indicator lights on the side of the pen. He pulls it away, clicks it off, and looks at Jenna. His expression hasn't changed. It's still neutral, still professional. "It's a beautiful stone," he says, his voice betraying nothing. "Very brilliant. So, what do you think?" Jenna asks, the anxiety creeping into her voice. "It's a moissanite," he says. The word just hangs there in the dusty air. Moissanite, not diamond. A word she's probably heard of, but associated with cheap knockoffs on late-night TV. I can picture the confusion on her face quickly hardening into disbelief. "What? No, that's not possible. It's a diamond. My fiancé, he wouldn't..." She trails off, the implication hanging in the air. The broker gives a slight weary sigh. He's had this conversation 1,000 times. "Ma'am, I can show you. A diamond conducts heat." This way he might have said, pulling out a sample stone to demonstrate. "This stone conducts electricity. It's a high-quality moissanite C1 graded. To the naked eye, 99% of people can't tell the difference." But the tester doesn't lie. The blood drains from Jenna's face. The room probably feels hot, the glass counters closing in on her. Humiliation washes over her in a sickening wave. She didn't just get bad news, she's been made a fool of. The $20,000 ring she'd been flashing in her friends' faces, the cornerstone of her new elevated status, was a lie. Her investment was a fraud. Her fiancé was a liar. But her mind is racing. Maybe the broker is wrong. Maybe he's trying to lowball her. The anger starts to bubble up, a hot protective fury replacing the cold shock. "Okay," she says, her voice sharp now. "Fine, whatever it is. What's it worth if I were to get a loan on it, hypothetically?" The broker picks up the ring again. He weighs it in his hand. His calculation is no longer about beauty or sentiment. It's about melt value and resale potential. The setting is 14-karat gold, he says, doing the math in his head. The stone itself, the moissanite, doesn't have a significant pawn value. It's the gold we'd be looking at mostly. He looks up at her, his eyes giving nothing away. "For a pawn loan, I could offer you $400. $400. From $20,000 to $400. In the space of 5 minutes, her entire perception of her engagement, of me, of her future, had depreciated by 98%. It wasn't just a number. It was an insult. It was a judgment. $400. It was less than the price of the designer handbag she was carrying. She must have just stared at him speechless. The fury that had been simmering was now a raging inferno. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate deception, a malicious act. I hadn't just been frugal. I had actively, intentionally humiliated her. I had given her a cheap imitation, and let her parade it around like a queen wearing a plastic crown. She probably snatched the ring off the tray, her hands shaking with rage. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say goodbye. She turned and stormed out of the shop, the little bell on the door jingling mockingly behind her. Back in her car, the ring felt toxic in her hand. It was no longer a symbol of love. It was a symbol of my cheapness, my deceit. It was proof that I didn't value her, that I thought she was only worth a $400 placeholder. She looked at the beautiful sparkling stone, and all she saw was a lie. And as she drove home, stewing in a venomous cocktail of shame and rage, she began to build her case against me. She was no longer a happy fiancée. She was a victim, and she was about to become the prosecution judge and jury in the trial of Nolan Hughes. And me, I was at my desk signing off on my final report for the day, thinking about what to make for dinner. I closed my laptop stretched and headed home completely unaware that I wasn't going home to my loving fiancé. I was walking into a war room. The trap had been sprung, the test had been failed, and the fallout was about to begin. The 2 days that followed were a masterclass in dramatic irony. On the surface, everything was normal. But underneath a fault line had opened, and the pressure was building toward an earthquake I didn't even know was coming. When I got home on the evening of the 23rd, Jenna was quiet. I mistook it for tiredness. I asked about her day, and she gave me one-word answers. She picked at the dinner I made, her eyes fixed on the television, but I could tell she wasn't watching it. She was somewhere else, entirely replaying the scene at the pawn shop, letting the humiliation curdle into a righteous, burning anger. She barely looked at me. She definitely didn't look at the ring on her finger, which now must have felt like a brand of shame. The next day, October 24th, I went to work like any other day. I was a financial analyst. My world was numbers, projections, risk assessments. I spent my morning analyzing market trends for a client portfolio, completely oblivious to the personal risk assessment being conducted against me in my own home. Around lunchtime, I sent her a text. It was a link to a wedding venue we'd talked about. I wrote, "Hey, looks like they have a cancellation for next fall. Should I inquire?" Minutes later, she replied with a simple, "If you want." That should have been a red flag. Jenna was never passive about wedding planning. She had binders, spreadsheets, a Pinterest board with thousands of pins. A simple "if you want" was the emotional equivalent of a flatline. But I reasoned it away. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was having an off day. I was the logical one, the analyst. I looked for patterns, and a single data point wasn't enough to signal a crash. I had no idea that while I was looking at venue pictures, she was meticulously planning her attack. She was pacing our living room, rehearsing her speech, twisting the narrative until I was the villain and she was the deeply wronged heroine. She was building her case, not with facts, but with feelings. How I'd deceived her. How I'd made her look like a fool to her friends. How I'd proven I didn't think she was worth a real diamond. Every hour that passed, her sense of victimhood grew stronger, and my alleged crime grew more monstrous. The confrontation happened on October 25th. I walked through the door around 6:30, tired but looking forward to a quiet evening. The moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The air was thick and heavy, charged with unspoken words. Jenna was sitting on the couch, perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. The television was off. The silence was deafening. "Hey," I said, dropping my briefcase by the door. "Tough day." She didn't answer immediately. She just watched me, her eyes cold and hard. Then she said, her voice dangerously level, "We need to talk Nolan." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Those are the 4 words that precede the end of the world. I walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her, creating a space between us that felt like a canyon. "Okay." I said slowly. What's going on? She took a deep breath, the kind an actor takes before delivering a monologue. I went to see my parents today, she began. That was a lie, but I didn't know it yet. And my mom, you know how she is with jewelry, she wanted to see the ring, to really look at it. I just nodded, waiting for the rest. She said it didn't look right. The fire, the sparkle, it was off. She told me I should get it appraised for the insurance. Her voice was trembling now, but it was the calculated tremor of someone playing a role. So I did. I took it to a jeweler this afternoon. Another lie. Just to get the paperwork done. She paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of her fabricated story settle in the room. I still had no idea where this was going. I just felt a growing sense of dread. Do you know what he told me, Nolan? She asked, her voice rising with manufactured disbelief. Do you know what the expert told me about my engagement ring, the symbol of your love and commitment to me? And then came the explosion. She shot up from the couch, her face a mask of fury. He told me it was a fake. She screamed the word, echoing in the quiet apartment. He laughed at me. He brought out his little machine and told me this thing. She ripped the ring off her finger and hurled it onto the coffee table between us. This 2-carat lie you put on my finger isn't a diamond. It's a cheap, worthless piece of glass. She was hyperventilating now, tears of rage streaming down her face. How could you? How could you humiliate me like that? I have shown this to everyone. My friends, my family. They all think you spent $20,000 on me and it's a lie. You're a liar. You're cheap and you're a liar. And you made me look like an absolute fool. She paced back and forth, a caged animal spitting accusations. It was all about her humiliation, her friends, her status. Not once did she say, I'm hurt that you weren't honest with me. It was all, you embarrassed me. I sat there watching the performance and a strange cold calm washed over me. The trap had been sprung, the test was complete, and the results were in. I didn't get angry. I didn't get defensive. I just looked at the beautiful, sparkling ring lying on the dark wood of the table. Then I looked back at her. My voice, when I finally spoke, was quiet. It cut through her tirade like a surgeon's scalpel. How do you know? She stopped pacing. The question threw her off script. What do you mean, how do I know? I just told you the jeweler. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. That's not what I'm asking. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. How do you know it's not a diamond? She stared at me confused. The tester. The jeweler showed me the, let me be more specific, Jenna. I said, my voice still level, still dangerously calm. There's only one way for a civilian to get a definitive on-the-spot appraisal of a ring's cash value. A jeweler will give you an insurance appraisal, a piece of paper. They won't typically offer to buy it from you. They're not in that business. But another kind of business is. The color drained from her face. She knew where I was going. Her righteous fury began to evaporate, replaced by the cold panic of being caught. You didn't go to a jeweler to get an insurance appraisal, did you? I asked. You went somewhere to find out what it was worth, what you could get for it. You went to a pawn shop, didn't you? Silence. She couldn't look at me. Her entire case, her entire victimhood narrative hinged on the lie of the jeweler. And I had just dismantled it with a single, logical deduction. She finally broke her voice, a small, defeated whisper. Yes, I nodded slowly. The final piece of data was in. Thank you for being honest. Finally. I picked up the ring from the table. It felt cool and heavy in my palm. You're right, I said, looking at her. It's not a diamond, it's a moissanite. A C1 graded 2-carat equivalent moissanite in a 14-carat white gold setting. I know that because I bought it on September 16th. It cost $1,850, and I bought it for a very specific reason. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Do you remember back in August? We were talking about our future, and you made a specific demand. You said you expected at least 2 carats. You didn't talk about a life together or a partnership. You gave me a transaction requirement, a minimum carat weight. You set a price on my commitment. So, I continued. As a financial analyst, I decided to conduct a test, an integrity test. I bought a ring that was to the naked eye visually identical to the $20,000 ring you demanded. It was beautiful. It was brilliant. It was something I chose with care. The test was simple. Would you love this ring as a symbol of my love, or would you only love it for its monetary value? I gave you a symbol, and I waited to see if you would treat it as a symbol or as a commodity. I stood up and walked toward her. She flinched, but I stopped a few feet away. You just gave me the answer, Jenna. You took this ring, our engagement ring, to a pawn shop. You tried to liquidate our future. You didn't care about the sentiment. You cared about the balance sheet. The test is over, and you failed. Her face crumbled. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, horrified understanding of what she had just revealed about herself. There was no more righteous indignation. There was only the ugly, naked truth of her own materialism laid bare on our living room floor. Nolan, she started, but there was nothing to say. She couldn't defend it. The engagement is over, I said. The words were firm, absolute, irrevocable. This was a conditional gift. The condition was our marriage. Your actions have made it very clear that you are not marrying me, Nolan Hughes. You were attempting to marry my wallet. By trying to sell the symbol of that condition, you have voided the contract. I want the ring back. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Stripped of her victim status, she had nothing left. No moral high ground, no legal claim. She was just a woman who had been caught trying to pawn her engagement ring. Slowly defeated, she nodded. The ring was already in my hand. The relationship ended not with a bang, but with the quiet click of the apartment door closing behind her 20 minutes later. I was left alone in the silence, the beautiful, sparkling lie resting in my palm. And now it's the morning of October 26th. I'm sitting at my dining room table. The sun is streaming in. In front of me are two items, the 2.0 carat moissanite ring and the receipt for $1,850. I don't feel heartbroken. I don't feel sad. I feel relief. A profound, all-encompassing relief, like a patient who's just been told the tumor is benign. The last 2.25 years feel like a sunk cost on a bad investment. An investment I was thankfully able to pull out of before it wiped out my entire portfolio. As a financial analyst, I can't help but calculate the return on this $1,850 purchase. I lost a fiancé who saw me as a walking bank account. I lost a future of constantly wondering if I was loved for who I was or for what I could provide. I lost a lifetime of emotional and financial manipulation. And what did I gain? I gained my future back. I saved myself from a disastrous marriage, from a divorce that would have cost me hundreds of thousands, if not more. I saved myself from a life of knowing deep down that my partner's love came with a price tag. The ROI on this ring is immeasurable. It's the single greatest investment I have ever made. I pick up the ring and the receipt. I walk over to my desk and place them inside a small box. I'm not throwing them away. They're a reminder, a lesson, a quiet personal trophy from a war I didn't even know I was fighting until it was already over. I close the box and put it in a drawer. A chapter of my life is over. I'm 31 years old. I'm single. And for the first time in a long time, my future feels completely and securely my own. And that is a victory.